We're particularly excited today. We're continuing our journey through the Schaeffer dialogues,
That's right.
specifically exploring Chapter 6 of Francis Schaeffer's, well, incredibly insightful book, Escape from Reason.
And it's a crucial chapter, really. It builds directly on where we left off last time.
Absolutely. Last time, we really dug into how art became this powerful expression of what Schaeffer calls the upper story, that realm of non-reason. It sort of symbolized a desperate escape from a world that increasingly felt, well, devoid of rational meaning. Art became a refuge, in a way.
Yeah, a refuge for what couldn't be explained or understood logically. It was a visual and experiential manifestation of a world just struggling.
Exactly. And today, our mission is to peel back another layer of Schaeffer's argument. He suggests that this very leap into the non-rational, this desperate search for meaning outside of reason, it ultimately leads to a profound sense of, well, madness.
Yeah, and he doesn't just mean that metaphorically.
No, he means it quite literally, doesn't he? In how we fundamentally perceive reality, even ourselves. It's frankly, a chilling trajectory.
It truly is. And what's fascinating here is that Schaeffer isn't just talking abstract philosophy. He argues this madness permeates the very fabric of our culture.
Right.
From academic thought to the silver screen, even into theology itself.
And as we navigate this, you listening will start to see how these ideas, these shifts in thinking from decades ago, have actually profoundly shaped the world you live in and how you understand it, often without you even realizing it. So let's unpack this. Schaeffer starts by drawing from a maybe unexpected guide to this concept of madness.
He does, yeah. He brings in Michel Foucault and his very influential book, Madness and Civilization. Foucault, as the literary critic Stephen Marcus pointed out in a review at the time, fundamentally challenged the very authority of reason itself.
Okay, that's a really provocative starting point, challenging the authority of reason. What does that even mean in Foucault's context? And why was that so significant then?
Well, Foucault basically argued that the 19th century's grand promise, that rationality and science would give us unified answers to everything.
Right, the Enlightenment dream.
Exactly. That promise just hadn't been fulfilled. He saw this deep despair in the transcendent powers of rational intellect. His work reflected a pervasive sense of, intellectual disillusionment. It signaled what Schaeffer would call a post-everything intellectual climate.
Post-everything. That sounds chaotic. Can you unpack that a bit? What did Schaeffer mean by that term, and why was it so impactful?
Well, imagine a world where all the old systems for understanding reality had just sort of dissolved. It wasn't just postmodern in art or philosophy. It was post-history, post-sociology, post-psychology. Yeah, this pervasive sense that every established framework for truth, morality, even human nature had been rejected. Society had chucked out these old systems, but critically, it hadn't replaced them with any new agreed-upon truths. It left this huge intellectual vacuum.
Okay, so if rationalists hadn't found unity and these frameworks were dissolving, where did someone like Foucault ultimately land? This is where Schaeffer makes a pretty shocking connection, isn't it? Linking him back to Rousseau.
He does. Schaeffer argues that Foucault, sort of following the trajectory of Rousseau's thought on freedom, arrived at this startling conclusion that the ultimate expression of autonomous freedom, freedom from all external constraints or rational structures, it becomes being crazy.
Being crazy as the ultimate freedom. That's incredibly bleak, but also, I don't know, strangely compelling in a dark way. How did Schaeffer distill that?
He put it into this stark dichotomy that really hits you. On one side, he saw the conclusion that the real freedom is madness.
Okay.
And on the other side, the consequence. The rational man is dead.
Man is dead.
Yeah, the idea is if reason has failed, if it leads to a dead end, then the only way to be truly free is to embrace the irrational, the non-rational, even to the point of what society calls madness.
Now, when you hear something like that, you might think, okay, this sounds super academic, maybe an isolated philosophical idea.
Right, stuck in the ivory tower.
Exactly. But Schaeffer quickly connects it to something very tangible from the 1960s, something a lot of people will recognize.
He does. He points right to the widespread phenomenon of serious drug taking in the 1960s. This wasn't just, recreational use. It was often seen as a deliberate, self-imposed, temporary mental illness.
Really? A self-imposed illness?
That was the view sometimes, yeah. And the results, Schaeffer notes, were remarkably parallel to the effects of schizophrenia.
So these deep philosophical ideas weren't just theoretical, they were being kind of lived out, often in dangerous ways, and people saw the connection.
Many did, yeah. Foucault's ideas weren't some distant theory. They provided a framework for understanding the end of duality and dichotomy, that breaking down of clear lines between objective reality and subjective experience.
Oh,
And that blurring of boundaries was precisely what many people were seeking in those drug-induced states.
what's truly unsettling, as Schaeffer points out, is that even if these deep philosophical discussions weren't happening in, say, everyday chats in the 1980s or later,
Yeah.
the underlying attitudes, the very system of society, were profoundly shaped by these things from the 60s. These ideas had this subterranean influence, changing the air we breathe, often without us realizing it.
It's a powerful point, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, we see this almost monolithic concept, as he calls it, of the non-rational leap permeating not just philosophy, but mainstream culture, especially cinema and television. It didn't stay in the journals.
Right. Think of the big filmmakers Schaeffer mentions. Bergman, Fellini, Antonioni, those avant-garde movements. Their works, he argued, basically carried the same message. He even draws this fascinating, stark contrast between American and BBC television back then, asking if you wanted to be entertained to death or killed with wisely planted blows. What did he mean by that?
Well, he wasn't suggesting one was necessarily better in, moral content, but maybe more transparent in its underlying philosophy. He argued that the BBC, often being more serious or intellectual, was overwhelmingly on the side of the 20th century mentality.
Yeah.
And the real danger wasn't just the explicit stuff, but the almost subliminal presentation of this deep-seated thinking. It allowed the mentality to seep into deeper cultural levels, influencing people without them even realizing the profound philosophical shifts they were absorbing.
That's a really powerful point, how ideas can just seep into the collective consciousness through art and media,
Yeah.
influencing us on a level we don't even consciously clock. So how did these films specifically show this madness or the man is dead idea?
Well, one of the most striking examples Schaeffer uses is Ingmar Bergman's film, The Silence. Bergman, who had initially made films exploring existentialism, eventually felt even that wasn't enough. The Silence became this profound statement, embodying the belief that man is really dead.
And what made it so impactful? What was the technique?
It pioneered a new kind of cinema, really. The camera acted like a non-human observer, just looking at life and reporting it as meaningless. There were no human statements connected with the pictures, just stark, detached observation of a world stripped of inherent meaning.
And this kind of bleak, objective view wasn't just in film, right? Schaeffer connects it to the black writers of the time, particularly Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. I remember that book feeling very detached.
Exactly. Reviewers noted Capote made no moral judgment. He just reported facts, the same kind of statement a computer hooked up to a camera eye would be able to make. Just data devoid of meaning, devoid of moral categories. It echoed that sense of man is dead, or at least the moral judging man is dead.
But the truly startling films, according to Schaeffer, weren't just about man being dead downstairs, below the line of reason and verifiable truth. They were about what man is above the line after the leap. What life looks like when you've consciously ditched reason and categories. That sounds even more unsettling.
It is. He brings up Elaine Resnais' The Last Year at Marienbad. And this isn't just Schaeffer interpreting. The film's director explicitly said its purpose was to show man without categories after making that non-rational leap.
So the film wasn't just confusing, it was meant to be confusing. To make a philosophical point, what did that look like visually?
The film's long, endless corridors and the unrelatedness of everything, events, people, memories, it symbolized a state where there's no truth and no non-truth and antithesis, no right and wrong. You are adrift.
Adrift,
Imagine that, adrift without any moral or rational anchors. It was designed to disorient the viewer, to make you feel the very lack of categories it was portraying.
That sounds like a truly disorienting experience, and it wasn't alone, was it? There was another film that took this even further, blurring reality itself.
Indeed. Federico Fellini's Juliet of the Spirits. Schaeffer tells a story about a student who watched it 3 times, desperately trying to figure out what was real and what was fantasy.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And Schaeffer's response, after seeing it himself, was basically, you could watch it 10,000 times and never figure it out. The film was deliberately designed to stop you distinguishing objective reality from illusion or insanity. It left no categories at all to discern what was real, psychological, or just plain fantasy.
So these filmmakers were essentially running philosophical experiments on their audiences, making them experience the loss of categories. And Antonioni's blow-up reinforced this too, didn't it?
Precisely. Another powerful picture of modern man upstairs without categories. The key point, Schaeffer stressed, is that once you accept this foundational dichotomy, the split between reason and non-reason, then it is immaterial what one places upstairs. Once you ditch a rational framework, anything goes in the realm of meaning.
This leads us straight into what Schaeffer calls upper story mysticism. That phrase really stands out. What exactly is a mysticism with nobody there?
It means a mysticism without categories. When all rational content is stripped away and you make that leap into the non-rational, your mystical experience is left undefined. So Schaeffer argues it does not matter upstairs whether you use religious or non-religious terms, art symbol systems, or pornography.
Wow.
They all become equally valid or maybe equally invalid expressions in that contentless space.
That's a powerful and frankly disturbing statement. And this very principle, Schaeffer argues, characterized the radical theology of the time, the whole God is dead movement.
Exactly. If man is dead below the line in the rational, verifiable world, these theologians concluded, well, God is dead also below the line. They basically asked, what's the use of talking about God in the upper story if we don't know anything about him? They just got tired of what they called God words.
So radical liberal theology ended up in this stark bind. In the non-rational upper story, you had just the connotation word, God. No content concerning God, no personal God, just the word like an echo.
Right.
And in the rational downstairs, where verifiable stuff exists, you were forced to conclude God is dead, man is dead.
It's a truly bleak theological landscape. It leaves radical theology with only a semantic answer, a word emptied of all content. And Schaeffer says this moves Western thought much closer to the infinite, impersonal everything of Eastern thought. Losing that unique, infinite personal God of, say, biblical revelation, it's like draining the color out of a vibrant picture.
It really is. And what's remarkable is how T.H. Huxley, way back in 1890, kind of saw this coming. He was quite the prophet, wasn't he?
Yeah. He really was. He predicted a time when men would remove all content from faith, making it proudly inaccessible to the attacks of the infidel.
So he saw this emptying out of meaning coming over a century before.
Pretty much. Schaeffer argues that modern theology, by accepting this dichotomy and shoving religion out of the verifiable realm, now mirrors the agnosticism or even atheism Huxley foresaw. Faith in this system gets placed squarely in the non-rational and non-logical, the unverifiable.
Okay.
It uses connotation words as symbols without definition, totally unlike scientific symbols, which are carefully defined and testable.
And if a word is just a connotation word with no definition or verifiable content, what does that mean for faith itself?
It means faith becomes unchallengeable because it could be anything. It's a free-for-all. You can project whatever you want onto it because there's no objective standard to check it against.
And this trend, this emptying out of words, even extended to the God is dead folks who kind of weirdly still use the word Jesus. How does that work?
Well, someone like Paul Van Buren, for example, argued that while the word God was dead for modern people, humanity wasn't actually poor because everything needed could be found in the man Jesus Christ.
Okay.
But for these theologians, Jesus became another non-defined symbol. Sure, it was rooted in historical memory, but it was used as basically humanism with a religious banner. You could pour any content you wanted into it, completely disconnected from historical or rational claims about who he was or what he taught.
So again, the theological trap is set. Schaeffer lays out this final dichotomy. In the non-rational, you have this contentless symbol, Jesus. And down in rationality, it's still God is dead. He really hammers the point. It does not matter what word you put up there, even biblical words, if your system is centered in the leap into the non-rational.
And this raises a really important point for us today, and maybe a strong caution for evangelical Christians. Schaeffer points out that some evangelicals, by emphasizing an encounter with Jesus over proving or disproving propositions, can inadvertently move upstairs into this same contentless zone.
So they might not mean to, but they're adopting the form of the dichotomy. Can you spell that out a bit more?
Exactly. They might fall into this pattern. Non-rational an encounter with Jesus versus rational one does not set about proving or disproving propositions. The erosion of meaning here is critical. Schaeffer asks, what real difference is there between that approach and secular semantic mysticism or the radical theology we just talked about?
That's a really challenging question. If the upstairs, the experience, the encounter is totally cut off from rationality and verifiable scripture, then on what basis do you choose one upstairs over another?
Right.
Why choose Jesus over Vishnu? Or, as Schaeffer provocatively asked, why not just a drug experience? It all becomes subjective, doesn't it?
It does, and this brings Schaeffer to a truly sorrowful conclusion. He says he reached a point where when he hears the word Jesus, a word that means so much to him personally, he listens very carefully. Because he has, with sorrow, become more afraid of the word Jesus than almost any other word in the modern world.
That's heartbreaking. Why would the word Jesus itself become so dangerous for him?
He explains it's because the word is being used as a contentless banner, inviting our generation to follow it. But without any rational scriptural content to test it against, the word is being used to teach the very opposite things from those which Jesus taught.
Like what? Could you give an example?
Well, he mentions the new morality, where someone might argue it's Jesus liked to sleep with a girl or a man if she or he needs you, even though that directly breaks specific moral teachings Jesus himself gave in the scriptures.
So the word Jesus becomes a vehicle for ideas that actually contradict the historical scriptural Jesus. That's what Schaeffer finds so terrifying.
Precisely. The word Jesus has become the enemy of the person Jesus and the enemy of what Jesus actually taught. Schaeffer even wonders if Jesus' own prophecy about other Jesuses appearing in the end times might refer to this very thing.
Wow.
The Antichrist, he reminds us, is Antichrist, not anti-non-Christ. A contentless Jesus becomes an enemy of the person Jesus.
This really drives home Schaeffer's urgent point, doesn't it? We need to understand this modern system as a whole, with its duality, its dichotomy, and that dangerous leap into the non-rational. We have to actively fight against this almost monolithic consensus of contentless banners that seems to be everywhere. It's not just abstract philosophy. It's about the very foundations of truth and meaning in our lives.
And that takes real effort, real intentionality to discern amidst all the noise of daily life.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? We've explored how abandoning reason, this philosophical leap, can lead to a kind of cultural and theological madness, where categories dissolve and even sacred terms lose their defined meaning, becoming just connotation words. You might be encountering these ideas in films, music, maybe even conversations, perhaps without fully realizing their historical roots.
Yeah, it definitely leaves us with a provocative thought. In a world where meaning can feel so fluid, so undefined, where even powerful words can be emptied of their content, what personal disciplines can you cultivate? How can you ensure your own understanding of truth stays grounded and meaningful? How do you keep your compass from just spinning wildly?
That's a question well worth pondering. And if you'd like to engage in an even deeper dialogue about these complex ideas and much more, we really encourage you to visit Joseph R. Miller over at his website, morethancake.org. He has a wealth of resources and insights waiting for you there.
Absolutely, and we're so grateful you joined us for this deep dive into Schaeffer's really vital work.
Until next time, keep exploring and keep seeking clarity.